Hello guys, welcome to my channel. I hope everything is okay in your life. This video series has been prepared for general features of the classes in BDO to be conveyed to you by the Classmasters in appropriate way. The information contained in this video is limited and will not be a detailed guide. In the content you will meet, there will be an interview about the structure of the class in general. If you have friends around you who have questions about this class, they will probably be able to find general answers. The purpose of interview is to convey the class to you in a short and fun way. First, you will watch official trailer of the class, then we will start chatting with our guests. During the chat, I will add as many images as possible and try to provide you with a better information transfer. I hope you enjoy these contents. All these and similar classes will be completed and published in time. If you do not want to miss the moment when they are published, do not forget to subscribe to the channel and activate the notification button. Enjoy watching. Well, hello. Welcome guys. Today's guest is Nayashe as Maehwa class. Welcome Nayashe, how are you?
Good, good. How you doing?
Thank you so much. May you please introduce yourself?
So my name is Nayashe. I'm 35 years old. Been playing this game for 2016, basically since it came out. I played on the initial day of launch, but then decided against it because it was extremely laggy on the day of launch. Waited a couple months, and then by that point, Maehwa came out, and I decided to restart and play as that class, and been playing that class ever since.
So, how did you find BDO? From a friend or website? How you go into MMORPG games? How did you decide to play BDO?
So originally, I found this game on my own accord. Seen some teaser trailers about it and picked it up. But like I mentioned, the first day was extremely laggy, and I just didn't like the feel of it at the time. So I stopped playing it for a few months. But then was talking about the game and told me that they fixed a lot of the lag issues, which wasn't exactly true. But it was in a lot better state. So I came back and played with him and his friend group, and that's what got me back into the game originally. But yeah, through a friend that helped me stick. Yeah, we just go around, and that's when I came back is after they opened up PvP for flagging up on people. This was before GVGs were a thing, so we just flag up on people and fight all the time. That's typically the same kind of approach I have with other games as well. Either I see trailers or a friend group is inviting me to it. Usually a friend group.
How many years have you been playing your class? Is this your first class? Are there any other classes that you started the game with or tried?
So I did originally start with a warrior. That was the day one, but then, like I mentioned, didn't play anymore for a few months, and then I came back and played Maehwa. And I actually have been playing Maehwa ever since. I really enjoyed the class, the aesthetic, the way the movement is, the combat, the comboing back then. It was a lot of fun. I liked the class a lot. I liked the way it looked. Didn't really get into any other classes. I mean, I've obviously played a few other classes for like seasons and stuff like that when seasons were introduced, and ever since they've been going on. But before that, not really. I didn't really touch any other classes. I had no interest in any other classes. Just didn't have the play style I preferred. I thought every other class was kind of weird for some reason. But I guess that's what happens when you find something you like and then everything else looks alien to you.
Understand. So, do you think your class is newbie friendly?
So my class is actually fairly newbie friendly. It's probably not the most newbie friendly of all the classes out there. It's definitely depending on which kit you play, if it's Succession or Awakening. Awakening is far more newbie friendly, I think, these days than Succession is. Before the reworks, I would have probably said Succession was probably a little bit more newbie friendly, but now I think Awakening is far more newbie friendly, especially for how the meta has shifted over the years. Yeah, I'd say it's fairly newbie friendly. If I were to rate it out of 10, PvE is pretty good. We're not top tier. I'd say we were mid tier, so if I were to look at that, I'd say about a 7 out of 10 for both Awakening and Succession. Succession being slightly better in some cases, but it depends on if it's a zone that requires a lot of movement, because Succession has stamina issues compared to Awakening. And in terms of PvP, I was rated out of 10. I'd say it's still about mid, or about a 7 out of 10.
Okay.
Not really great, not really bad. We're in the middle. We just don't have some of the key defensive and offensive things that kind of make a class S tier, so to speak, like top 10. But we have a lot of options in our kit that make us a really solid class.
Do you using mouse movement while you're doing PvP?
I do use mouse movement. However, it's not for everybody with how it is. I mean, it's pretty difficult to get used to initially, but it's also not really necessary to in a lot of cases. You can perform without it. It just helps give you that edge, I guess, a little bit, but you could definitely make do without using it.
Do you prefer Awakening or Succession right now, and why?
So personally, I would prefer Awakening. If I were to be talking to a newer player, I would be telling them to play Awakening instead of Succession, because just with the meta, how it is, it's very damage trade oriented and there's less openings available, whereas Succession is not as well designed for the meta. It relies a lot on catches in order to kill their opponent, whereas Awakening doesn't necessarily require that. And this is due in part to the reworks that happened about a year ago. Yeah, that's kind of changed a lot for Awakening. It's made it definitely more favored for damage trading. Got a better kit overall for the current meta, so Awakening is far better for what I would prefer for other players.
Okay, so you know, and the older viewers maybe know or not, I published a PvE tier list about all classes. May you please analyze this Maehwa page for our viewers in general?
I'd say overall everything I pretty much agree with. So if I were to go down the list with Awakening's early game spots, 5 out of 5 that's pretty fair. With less issues with stamina and mobility, she's able to jump from pack to pack really easy and one-shot them, so you can constantly keep moving. So that's good. Succession does have the stamina problems, so the early game spots are a little bit more difficult to keep up the momentum. However, you can, so I'd say the 4 out of 5 is fair. The crowded spots for Awakening, it depends on the zone, but yeah, 4 to 5 is fair. Succession has a little bit easier time with dealing with crowded spots just because of how many hits and how the accuracy mods are on their skills. They tend to hit the mobs a lot more often, a lot better, and a lot wider AoEs, which is interesting because Awakening did get a lot of buffs for AoE sizes and stuff like that and accuracy mods, but for some reason, just because of how the hits are in PvE, it still favors Succession. In-game spots, I'd say they're pretty close to being the same. Awakening being a 4 and Succession being a 4 out of 5 is fair. Succession does squeak out a little bit ahead, especially at spots like Gyphins where there's no real need for a lot of mobility. You could just focus on the back attacks and stuff like that on the mobs. She does far better in those in-game spots. Awakening also does really well, but just a little bit less. Mobility is the same. However, I would say Awakening has a little bit better time with mobility in terms of non-stamina usage. So that'd be the only caveat there. They are, however, very similar. Durability-wise, now the durability, I don't necessarily agree with this as much. I think Maehwa is a very squishy class in general. We have a lot of hit and run type playstyle, guerrilla tactic type playstyle that's kind of required. You can't really just sit in and take a lot of hits. So I'd say the Succession is more in line with what I would agree with. Awakening being slightly better with more forward guard options and more super armors to utilize. So I would say probably about a 3.5 to 4 for Awakening versus Succession's 3.
Thank you. So after this point, I want to make these subjects a bit more detailed. May you please give us a bit information about Awakening PvE? What are you doing with early game spots, mid game spots, more like you need to pull mobs like Stars and Bloody Monastery, you know, orcs and etc. And end game spots, Gyfin, Olun, Hexe, Trolls, even if you tried Crypt. Maybe you can talk about Crypt. May you please analyze them?
Sure. So early game spots, like I mentioned, like both Succession and Awakening have the ability to just like delete a pack instantly and jump to the next one. So there's no problem in terms of like instantly deleting a weaker pack, going on and just continuing to move that way. So I'd say really good in that regard. Very minimal APM usage, so you can use like one skill and then use another one skill, and it's really smooth transition for both kits
Uh-huh.
for your early game zones. The mid game zones like orcs, those zones they're pretty much set up as packs already, so not much pulling is required. I'd say a zone like Histria would require more like pulling packs together. And Maywood does okay with pack pulls. We have abilities like Ultimate Maehwa's Will, which is a Rebam skill that we can use for AoE vacuum for certain mobs that can be vacuumed. Just nicking the mob so it gets their attention and activates them, wakes them up, and they start heading towards you.
I remember a skill they added on rework. Is this maybe Q was the button? I don't remember. And it also reduced 20 DP and it has 9 or 10-second cooldown. And the AoE was bigger, and one of my friends said this will be our pull skill. Which skill is
Yeah.
that?
So that was the one I was going to get to next. Ultimate Memo as well as the Rebam skill that affects both kits. In
Mm-hmm.
Awakening, we have Oppression. That's the skill you're referring to. With the reworks, they did increase the wake up radius, so the little bit of damage it does. The CC is still the same range, but the wake up distance is further. So it's a really good pull skill as well, and you can alternate between the two because the Rebam skill has about a 20 or 22-second cooldown. I can't remember off the top of my head. I think it's 20. The Oppression cooldown was reduced all the way down to 9 seconds. So that's from 20, I think it was originally. So it's a lot more useful and a lot more available than it used to be. Yeah, Awakening has a far better like overall kit for pulling than Succession, but Succession also has other tools with being able to quickly do fairly large AoEs in terms of like four blind thrust and decapitation to grab packs really quickly, go on to the next. So they're pretty even. I'd say Awakening probably inches out a little bit better on grabbing packs, but with how the both kits work, it doesn't really matter honestly in most cases. Especially how most zones are designed nowadays. You don't have to like grab packs and stack them up as much anymore with the medium zones. For the endgame zones like Hex, I have not done Crypts. That's a big boy zone. I'm not ready for that yet. But also I'm also not on that grind for the Debo belts and necks yet, so not at that point in my gear progression. Those zones like Hex is a good example because I've done a lot of that. You don't really need to group those up as much either, because
Mm-hmm.
a lot of the zones lately they've redesigned them to be more like actual packs themselves, so you can just jump on the packs and start focusing on the specific mobs that you need to. Like at Hex, the Gravedigger guy, forget the mob's
Uh-huh.
actual name, but he looks like a Gravedigger. You have to kill a bunch of mobs around him so he absorbs the souls, and then when he pops out, you focus all your efforts on him to spawn the extra event, kill all the crazy mobs. But yeah, we do pretty well on those. Succession does a little bit better because of how the AoEs work, even though Maehwa Awakening rework did allow for better AoE sizes and better overall damage. Succession still ekes out a little bit, not by much no anymore. It's kind of evened out for the most part. Defensively, you got to be careful at zones like that. If you don't have the DP, using forward guards a lot will help a lot, and Awakening has a lot of those. Succession not so much. But I found that if you use an elixir rotation, utilizing Grim Reaper's elixir as well as draining with
Uh-huh.
a various assortment of other offensive, you get plenty of HP back. As long as you're not being one shot by some of the bigger mobs, you can recover really easily. If your gear is on the lower side, probably look into doing an elixir rotation.
Okay, thank you. So what about Awakening PvP? 1v1, 1vx, 5v5, or I don't know, solo maybe, and large scale. What is the potential of this class?
So Awakening 1v1's pretty good. Since the reworks, they did tweak how Awakening works. We're a little bit weaker on the 1v1 potential as far as CC catches. However, we got it back in a different form in terms of like damage trading. So it's just a different approach to dealing with how the meta has shifted. So Awakening for the most part evened out from what it used to be to what it is now. But overall what that did was it made our 1v1 about the same. Our 1vx got better because we have more protected damage and a lot better protected damage because it's a lot stronger damage wise. So 1vx, we perform a little bit better than we used to. That being said, unless you have your E buff up, you probably aren't 1vxing too often. We're not like a ninja that can just jump around and iframe around, so we do tend to take a lot of damage. So unless you outgear your opponents, outskill your opponents pretty heavily, 1vxing is going to be a little bit on the difficult side. You have to really know your opponent's cooldowns and dodge all the ones that are relevant, like slows and big heavy damage skills, so that you can keep yourself in the fight longer and just trade them down, catch them out, give yourself time to catch them out of their protected skills. But yeah, 1vx is definitely possible. I've done it on a number of occasions, both in open world and AOS. Just depending on your opponents, the classes you're dealing with, and the gear difference if there is. 5v5 type environments or like AOS, we perform okay in 5v5 environments as long as basically we're not being focused. People focus down at Maehwa. We don't have like a lot of stamina to just keep running all day, every day. Musa has a lot better time with that. They can kite very well. Maehwa can kite a little bit, but not forever. So if we get focused, that's where our problems start showing. This is also seen in AOS as well. If you focus on a Maehwa, you keep slows on them and just keep on them and don't let yourself get countered or caught out by their teammates, then you can pretty much run down a Maehwa if you constantly slow them. So you got to be, as a Maehwa player, you have to be very careful about your positioning and not being focused. Playing very guerrilla tactic oriented, wait for opportunities and then go in and peel for your teammates or just dump all your damage and dip. Don't linger too long. That's kind of the play style that tends to work the best. This is also dependent on your personal skill level versus your opponent's, obviously. When it comes to large scale, depends on what role you're playing. Maehwa can perform pretty well. We have a lot of damage now. We can kill both DR targets and evasion targets equally with Awakening pretty well. Depends on the gear difference, of course, and if you're doing cap siege or not. Maehwa performs pretty well. It's a lot of what I was just talking about a moment ago, where it's positioning oriented, not being the focus target, diving in when people aren't suspecting it, going for the backline targets. That's a lot of what it is to play as a Maehwa, whether it's Succession or Awakening. But Awakening performs really well in all those forms.
Do you want to add something about Succession PvE?
Succession is, well, as far as the PvE is concerned, I mentioned a fair amount about that, as they're similar to how Awakening is. It's just the main things is very stamina gated. So if it's something like a zone that makes you move around a lot, then you're going to be struggling with that. If it's a zone that doesn't really require you to move around, like Gyfins, an in-game zone like that, you have no issues, and you can just dump out damage and constantly reposition around their back and just keep dumping damage. So Succession PvE wise performs really well overall. It just depends on the zone. It outperforms Awakening in some zones. PvP for the 1v1, 1vx, 5v5 large scale. I talked about Awakening, but Succession I didn't explicitly mention. There are some differences there. In terms of like 1v1 with how the meta has shifted, Succession struggles a lot more nowadays because there's a lot more protections in the game, and because of their mobility issues compared to Awakening, and damage trading isn't as easy for Succession. They tend to be less favorable in a lot of 1v1 matchups, even though they have better CC catches than most classes. Doesn't matter if those classes are protected all the time. So 1v1 Succession's kind of below average lately because of how the meta is. 1vx, it's even worse because of the same issues that it has in 1v1s. It is even more compounded in 1vx. You just have so many openings in your kit that you can be peeled pretty frequently, and it's hard to 1vx. In most cases, depending on the classes you're fighting against, probably impossible in some cases. 5v5s are okay. Same kind of principle with Awakening, except you have less valuable SA trading potential. It does have some SA trading potential in 5v5s because you're not being focused as much, but it's not as valuable as, say, Awakenings, where Awakening can e-buff and delete targets really easily in Super Armor. Red Blade, Red Moon is basically the main SA trading skill that is available in Succession. Beyond that, they don't really have too much else for SA trading. Blooming is a very risky skill that does a lot of damage, but it's unprotected. So in a 5v5 scenario, there's a good likelihood you could be peeled. 5v5 is kind of like mid, maybe below average. And then large scale is even worse, just because there's so much craziness usually going around in large scale. You have to really be picky with your fights in large scale with Succession. You can't just like jump in and throw damage around whenever you want. You have to be far more picky than Awakening. So yeah, Succession's kind of down bad when it comes to PvP in the current meta.
I think you summarized Maehwa very well. Let's talk about game itself. What do you think about BDO for current situation, from past until now?
Well, the game's changed a lot. Changed so much over the years. All the things that are normal nowadays, they would have been like massive conveniences back in the day. I mean, I'm thinking about the times when Essential Marketplace was its own form of a mini game. Just trying to get the item you wanted, you have to basically bid and get lucky. Even just normal things that you can find freely available on the marketplace nowadays, but not just
Mhm.
because of the demands and availability, but also with how the marketplace worked back then. It wasn't the central marketplace like it is now. It was a bidding system. So it was a lot different. The way Node Wars and GVGs and everything has changed from way back.
So, if you have a chance to add new feature to BDO or change something, what would it be?
I guess there's a couple things I can talk about here. With the introduction of AOS, Arena Solaire, there would be some quality of life aspects to be had if they introduced something like a death damage chart, so to speak. So basically, like how League of Legends has it, where they would show where the damage came from and from what types of damage that killed you, essentially. So, for example, if you're fighting in a 3v3 in AOS, you can find out if you died from just mostly dots. Say they had a Suck Ninja on their team with ebuff. Was the dots the primary source of damage that was being dealt to you that caused you to die? If so, maybe you should probably look out for that skill, play around that skill a lot better. Was it a specific class that was just catching you out more often that was causing you to get caught and killed? Stuff like that I think might be helpful to some players. It might not necessarily have the best fit in this game with how this game works, but I think it could help. It's not like how League you can build you can literally gear towards a specific damage type reduction. So it's a lot different in League with how it works. But what it could do is at least give you some more insight of, okay, what classes are going to be problematic for me with my playstyle or my class specifically? How should I change up how I play around them? Those kinds of things could help. Those kinds of analytical data could help you figure out what you need to be doing differently. So that might be an interesting feature. Another thing would be like, I mean, they've been doing a lot of quality of life changes in the game, so the sky's the limit on what they've been introducing, honestly, lately. But something they could do is maybe figure out another usage for the crystallized despairs are dropping in price pretty heavily. And in KR, I know that they dropped all the way down to like 30 mil, probably going to get lower as more and more players are getting their Vel Cups, it's going to just drop continuously more and more. And then there's going to be a surplus of crystallized despair sitting on the marketplace, thousands eventually. So I think they need to like come up with another usage for them beyond just the cups. Maybe have them as something that you can exchange for maybe stacks, kind of like how the fossilized despairs are. Maybe have them usable in some other way, because I can foresee that market just plummeting, which in turn makes Elvia Calpheon spots drastically worse. Like, for example, Hex, its value is constantly going down every time these are dropping in value. So it's only going to get worse and worse, because that's some of the main aspects of the income at spots like Calpheon Elvia spots is the crystallized despairs, as well as the sealed black magic crystals, among other things. But figure out another usage for them, some sort of exchange, maybe. Another thing is maybe like the sealed black magic crystals. I mean, the market's essentially rock bottom right now for those. There's not a mass amount of them sitting on the marketplace, but it probably won't be long before there is. So figuring out additional usages for those, maybe exchanging, bundles of those for something. Maybe like, for example, taking 30 of them or more and exchange them for like a raw black magic crystal of the Viper kind of thing, or something like that.
Uh-huh.
That would unfortunately impact other markets too. So an idea that needs to be well hashed out. They just need to think of something else, because those are just bottoming out, and eventually there's just going to be shitloads on the marketplace for make those items more versatile so that they can maintain their value, or just increase the trash, which is kind of like a lame way to do it, because
Yeah.
just upping the value of trash is the yeah, I mean, they need to do some probably, because I can foresee those zones just ultimately dying.
What are your advices for newbie or returnee players, or whoever wants to reroll Maehwa?
I mean, you're probably going to hear this a lot, but honestly, play the class you love, play the class you enjoy, because the mass majority of the content in this game is grinding for gear. A lot of it is based on grinding. So you're going to be doing a ton of that. So play what you
Yeah.
like, play what you enjoy. Doesn't matter if it's the top tier grinder. Ultimately, most top tier grinders are very lame to play, and they're just not fun. Players that play on those classes would probably even suggest that just trying to white knight their class. But yeah, I mean, overall, like just play what you enjoy because that's all that really matters in the end. You're playing this game to enjoy it. And if Maehwa
Mhm.
is that class, then Maehwa is that class. Enjoy it and play it. If you want to get involved in PvP, just keep practicing. Like what we talked about, you have to kind of know some of your opponent's kit, at least the bare minimum, so that you know defensively what you need to do and offensively what you can punish. So spend some time in the arena. Like I PvP'd probably thousands of hours before I got to the point where like people started recognizing who I was in the PvP community because I would go out of my
Mhm.
way to fight individuals in the PvP community all the time and learn how to fight against X class. You're not going to get that with just doing a few hours, you know? Like
Of course.
you can understand some of the basics, but not the experience that comes with it. You need to build up that experience. So for newer players, if you want to get into PvP, don't get frustrated. Always fight someone that's better than you. Don't fight someone that's just not very good at the class because honestly, you're going to get experience against bad habits that you're not going to see against better players.
So we're coming towards the end of the interview. And is there anything you would like to add?
I would say that you can catch me on my stream and other channels, but frankly, real life has been hampering down on my ability to be available to stream and go on YouTube. But I'll give you my links to my channels anyways for those players that want to try to catch me on live on stream. But it's Nayashe underscore NA .tv on Twitch, and then Nayashe underscore NA on my YouTube as well. Yeah, you can catch me on there and see some of my content.
Okay, I want to say thank you. You accepted my invitation. It was an honor to have you as a guest. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me on. Appreciate it.
Alright guys, do not forget, video is just a game. Have a nice game.